So in today's video, I know it's going to be a little bit longer than 10 minutes, but you know what? I'm going to talk about a great differentiating technique on segmenting your pens. It's a real simple technique. We're going to make a jig. We're going to look at the jig and how I use the jig. And we're going to talk about all the different things that you can do segmenting your pen. We're going to talk about in-tube segmenting and off-blank segmenting. And you know what? Once you get it, you're going to go, wow, I like this. And once again, as always, it's just something that differentiates yourself from everybody else that's out there making pens. With this technique, the world is going to open up. And I really suggest you try some of these things and shoot me some texts or shoot me some emails and let me know how it works. Let's get into the video. The next topic I want to cover is basic segmenting. And segmenting is not only a full 90-minute class in and of itself, it's a journey. I mean, there's a lot of people out there. There are some spectacular segmenters on there. If you're looking for a great pen segmenter, look up Mark James. He's on IAP. Some of the best segmenting I've ever seen. And not only do they segment the blanks, but they'll segment the finials. They'll do the caps in the middle. They'll do the center bands. They're spectacular segmenters. We're not going to get into that level of detail. What I've said through the entire video is I want to give you a tour of a lot of the different topics and things that you can do out there, and encourage you to go out there and explore and work on these and do some details on your own. So let's take a look at these two blanks that are out on the table. These are commercially available blanks, and the challenge with commercially available blanks are typically they're a little bit more expensive. But you can see here, and what we're going to focus in on the ones that we're going to be doing is the linear. And so these are basically just pieces of wood that have been glued together this way. This one is glued together the other way, and this one just has a diagonal pattern. But you know what? Once you get the basic techniques down, we can always vary the insides on it. And so I do a fair amount of segmenting, but not a lot. So I built myself a little jig, and this is the jig. And I think getting the jig together is probably the thing that allowed me to do a lot more segmenting than trying to do it with clamps and things like that. So this jig is very simple and probably didn't cost me more than, I'm going to guess, $6 or $7 to build. So this is 1/2-inch cutting board. And so what I wound up doing is I took my 1/2-inch cutting board, I put a piece on each side and a piece on the bottom. You can see it's had years and years of work because it has split a couple times on me. But then I used screws on the side, and I've got a little base plate in here. And all I'm going to do is when I want to do my segmenting, is I'm going to take my piece. In this case, I've already glued this together, but we'll show you how easy it is. This is a piece of maple, a piece of Purple Heart, another piece of maple, and to give it a little bit of an accent, I put in some black veneer. Now there's a lot of great veneering materials out there. So, you know, you don't have to limit yourself to just wood. I know a lot of people who have used, and I've used it myself, is guitar pickguard material. I'm going to show you my favorite pen that I've ever made at the end of this, which is a segmented piece that I made with guitar pickguard material. But in this case, you can also use aluminum. So aluminum cans work really well. Take an aluminum can, cut it open, be able to get the strips down into it, and use the aluminum can as your accent pieces on here. We've already talked about turning aluminum. We know that aluminum is not that hard to turn. Sands up just great. So using aluminum as an accent piece on here, no problem at all. It's also not uncommon to mix acrylics in. So start to play with some segmenting on some acrylics. I'll tell you there's some beautiful color combinations are out there. Some of the turquoises that you can do. Some of the cat blanks, if you remember the old cat blanks. They're just phenomenal and perfect pieces to use as an accent piece. So let's take a look at this jig and take a look at how easy it is to use. So in this case, I would put my pieces in here. I would face the glue on here. I have also used wax paper and put wax paper in here. I don't do it on this piece because I don't want you to, it's a little bit harder to see if that was in there, but I would wrap my little pocket in here with a piece of wax paper and then basically use my finger to put it down. So I faced off all my pieces with glue. I put this in here, and now I'm simply going to take my finger and I'm going to rough turn these in so that I get a little bit of pressure on there. You can see I get a little bit of pressure there. A little bit of pressure there. If I'm using wood and I'm just and I'm just segmenting wood, I'm going to use Tight Bond. I'm going to use any kind of wood glue on it because I find that it has just enough of an open time so that I can get it in there and I can get it really nice and crushed. If I'm doing acrylics, and remember we said not all acrylics are acrylic. If I'm going to be doing acrylic, I will typically then use 5-minute epoxy and I'll let it set up for a while. So I've got the top piece in here that I'm going to use to push down. I'll typically make sure that the piece is up and down first and locked in. So I've got this little wrench here that I will put into there. Notice that when I made this piece, I left a little bit of an opening here. That was simply so I can get my wrench into it. And then I'm going to turn it, and I've got it locked in. Then I'm going to take this piece here, turn it, and I've got it locked in. Turn it, I've got it locked in, and on the final one. Now one thing that's kind of confusing on segmenting and on pressure is everybody thinks that you want to put just the maximum amount of pressure on here. You don't. You want to find the balance in terms of pressure so that you're not squeezing all the glue out. So I always get it down so that, you know, I'm not going to tighten it more than finger tight because I know that that's going to be enough on there. And if I tighten it finger tight, I know that I got more than enough bond on here to get that pressure going and to get that done. So this is a simple blank. We put it together, we glued it up. We could take this out. I could cut it in segments and then rotate it and put, you know, this face this way, that one that way, and move it around. One thing that you want to think about when you're segmenting, if you're going to start to do patterns in your segmenting, think about beforehand what the pen's going to look like and what kind of pen and component set that you're using. And I think that's one thing a lot of people forget. So assuming I got a blank like this, if I'm using a component set where it's going to cut off in the middle of it, it may not turn out so that I get that really nice lineup that we talked about really early in the videos to make sure that everything is aligned. So if I'm going to do something where I've got a pattern in there like this, or I put a pattern in there, or I've, you know, as I said on this piece, I've taken it and I've cut it and I've cut it and I've cut it, I'll measure the top and I'll measure the bottom and I'll try to make those cuts kind of proportional so that I get a full piece on top and a full piece on bottom. So in this blank, if I was to use this for doing any kind of non-Sierra, any kind of tubed kit, I would take my tube and I'd try to find out so that I can get that top tube lined up possibly right up on the top here and on the bottom here, measure that out, make my cut, and when I'm gluing in that tube, try to get it so that it matches up in here. And then on the bottom, I'm going to do the same thing. It's always weird when I see, you know, like if a piece comes out here and it's cut right here and I only get half of a block on it, it just means you didn't take that extra minute at the beginning and think about segmenting. So segmenting is a world all itself, but you know what? It's fun to do, and with a little bit of thought and a little bit of prep and some of the technique we just learned here and talked about here, you're going to be able to do a great job on it. So I always look at two different kinds of segmenting too. This is freeform segmenting that I'm doing pre, and then I've also done on-tube segmenting. And what do I mean by on-tube segmenting? It's going to be, say I wanted to do a blank that looks like this. These are all commercial blank. This is not a commercial blank, but this is a commercial. I'm just combining commercial blanks that are out there with no casting. Remember, the whole purpose of this thing is that we're not casting. So I take a black blank. Then I take, I'll even show you the name on here, the polyresin pinwheel blank distributed by Woodcraft. I think Rockler has the same blank. And notice when I got the top, notice that really cool pattern that I had on here, or that they have on here? Now one of the challenges to this is that if I was to just simply take this, glue it all together and try to do the segmenting using my jig, I'm not going to get it perfectly square in the middle, right? Or perfectly drilled up in the middle. I need this so that when I look at these things here, they're all approximately the same size going around. And so how do we do that one? What we do is I will cut off a chunk of this, and then we talked about drilling earlier, right? And we drill on the lathe, and I can get this thing to line up perfectly square in the middle of it. Well, once I do that, I'll then take my piece that I've drilled with the hole in it, and I'll go take it to the bandsaw, and I'll cut these in about quarter inch pieces on it. And these are the pieces that I get out of it. So notice that I got these nice, perfectly centered quarter inch pieces with a nice pattern on it. And now to get these really nice and faced, I'm going to basically take it over to a disc sander and I'm going to kiss it on the disc sander. So this is going to be a cheap thing for me to do, but I'm going to encourage you to go take a look at Dick Singh's video, which is also in this session, on these videos on inlays, and watch how he made a jig that he uses two-faced tape on here, and then he'll be able to use that jig to take this up and kiss it against the disc sander, and it's an incredible invention, or sorry, iteration of a way to do this one, and then your hands are free and you don't have to worry about it, and you get perfectly flushed or faced off blanks. So then what I'm going to do is I'm going to take my blank, the black blank, and I'm going to drill the hole in there also. And then, now the key to this one is spacing. So if I know that these are about 1/4 inch, I'm going to figure out what kind of blank that I'm going to use, or what kind of tube set that I'm going to use. In this case, this is going to be on a Vertex, or a Vertex Supreme, and that's my tube size. And so I like it so that when I put these on here, I'm going to get basically the same thickness here on top and on bottom. So what I've done is I've taken this blank here and I've cut off 1/4 inch pieces. And so there are my 1/4 inch pieces. Same thickness basically as the segmented piece that I'm going to be putting into it. And then there's a little bit of math, right? Then what I'll do is I'll put these together and I'll put these together. I'll put it on the tube if I have to. And then using a metal ruler, I'll measure out how much more blank that I need for this to happen. And then I'll I'll cut the rest of that blank this way. So now all we're going to do is we're going to have a little bit of fun in putting this together and getting a beautifully segmented blank. So I'll put the middle piece in first. Then I'm going to put one of these parts on here and one of these parts on here. Then I'm going to take this piece over here and I'm going to put it over there. I am going to glue it, using 5-minute epoxy. And I'm just going to put a little bit of clamp pressure on it. So I'll use a hand clamp on here to get nice pressure on it. But now when I turn it, I've got this fantastic segmented blank, perfectly centered, and all I did was I made something that was done with 2 commercial blanks. I just put 2 commercial blanks together. I put this pinwheel blank together, and I put this blank together to get this blank. So I also want to talk a little bit, when we're talking about segmenting, also on these things, is proportions and center lines and things like that, and pattern. So remember, we talked about balancing this off so that I'd always have this thing sitting in the middle. So that one's important to me. I also want to take a look at this, and I want to do it with proportions to the kit that I'm using, or the component set that I'm using. So if I've got a piece that I've got a top cap on here and a bottom cap on here, I'm going to evaluate that and I'm going to think about that before I even make the blank. If I took this thing down and I made it miniature to handle the top, if it had a top cap on here, this is not going to look right. This is going to look scrunchy. So I'm going to use this kind of technique on something where either A, I don't have a cap on it, or it's possibly the magnetic Vertex, which is a great component set in and of itself. If I'm going to do a nicer one, or any of the Diamond Neural sets or the junior sets that are out there, and I've got that cap on here, I'm going to consider the proportion on this accent ring, not only just on the bottom or where I'm doing it, but it's got to be proportionate to the top and how I'm going to build the top. So there's a whole lot of thought that goes on to this one, but as I said, segmenting can be in a world of its own. Now, we've done one segment piece, right, that's been perfectly linear, and we had the linearity. We've also done another segmented piece where we've kind of cross-hatched it. So what else can we do? let's take this one apart and just show kind of one other little technique that you can have in the back of your pocket for doing segmenting that's not complicated at all and gives you something else that when you're walking around at shows, nobody else has. So in this case, I took a ebony blank, and let me pull this one out. I took an ebony blank, and I know that, you know, basically what size my tube is going to be and how much tube I'm going to have in there, and I just put a diagonal cut in it. Sorry, a non-linear cut, a scroll cut into it, if you will, and just cut it around and did a little bit on there. Now I don't want to go to the extreme. I don't want to go out to the outside because I'm going to lose it. I'm going to lose that little piece that I've got into it. And then I took some white veneer, white dyed veneer, wood white dyed veneer, same thickness, and if I drop it in there, I'm fine. I'm not going to do it with my clamp, but you can see here is that if I then put glue on here and put it in my clamp and my jig setup, I now have a pretty cool looking blank that I have going on here. You can also then, nothing stopping me, right, from taking this, once I have this done, let it dry in my jig, and then going back to my bandsaw and cutting a pattern out over here and doing the same thing. So it's a non-symmetric pattern, but you know what? It gives me a couple little strands. Now, obviously in this one, we're going to get back to the thing we talked about first. We're going to be very, very careful so that when we cut this here and we glue in our tube and we glue it in from this side, I don't want to push the tube too far in this way or too far in that way, because I want to make sure that when I put that cap on the pen is that these things still line up, and especially if I'm going to be doing something on both sides. There's also nothing stopping you from taking this, gluing it up, pulling it out, and then doing another cut this way, right? So if I cut it this way and glue it all back together, you'd be able to get that pattern. So once again, it's kind of fitting the formula, and what I was hoping for in this series, in this demo, is that it's not a single technique that we're going to be looking at. I want to arm you with as many techniques as I think I can give you so that when you're doing shows, you can differentiate yourself. So I'm going to throw in as I promised you, I'm going to put up pop up a picture of my favorite pen. Right here, it's my interpretation of Eddie Van Halen and the Eddie Van Halen Frankenstein pen. If you've ever seen Eddie Van Halen's guitar, looks a lot like this one. So what I did was I took a red pen blank, and I did this one about 10 to 15 years ago. I remember bringing it to an MPG for a contest about 10 to 15 years ago. Used a red pen blank, and then I cut it at weird angles, and then actually glued in. This is black and white pickguard material that's in there, so it's guitar pickguard material, and just segmented it in there, and then used the jig to be able to get it to hold it down. This is where, that pen is where this kind of jig comes in so handy, because I can give it pressure both this way and this way at the same time by snugging it up first, as opposed to if I try to do it with a clamp and I get the clamp, and some of the ones that are at an extreme angle are going to want to slide, and they're going to want to slide this way or they're going to want to slide that way. Well, if I have it in here and I've got just enough pressure on here from the sides as I'm putting it down on the top, it can't slide. So if you're going to do something like that, make yourself one of these jigs. I think you're going to love it, and I think you're going to find that you can do a lot of stuff with it. As with all my videos, I thank you, and I thank you for watching. So if you like the video, please give me a like. If you want to subscribe and you haven't subscribed to my channel, please subscribe to my channel. And most importantly, two things. If you have questions or comments, please put them down in the questions and comments. If you have suggestions, put them down in the comment section also. This was simply the way I do things. It's not the way to do things. And if you have a better way of doing it or something that you want to contribute, please put it in the comment section. Also in the comment section, give me any kind of other topics you'd like me to cover. As I said in other videos, I have friends that might be able to cover it if I can't cover it. And finally, I started a Facebook group called 10 Minutes to Better Pen Making. It's going to be the easiest way to get in touch with me or ask me any kind of questions or have any suggestions for further videos. Please join that group on Facebook. As always, I thank you for watching. This video made possible by the fine folks at Exotic Blanks. For all your pen making needs, Exotic Blanks has you covered. Find them at www.exoticblanks.com. And also by Pen Makers International, the educational source for pen making.